The park has been locked for weeks, and now I finally know why. But you shouldn't be here. I was walking home past the quiet streets, the kind where every leaf rustle sounds louder than it should, when I noticed the gates. Rusted iron bars glinting dimly under the flickering streetlights, a padlock that hadn't been there the week before. My stomach sank because something about the way the shadows pooled inside the park felt deliberate. It was too quiet. No distant laughter, no barking dogs, no kids kicking a ball around on the worn asphalt courts. Just the hush of a suburban night that knows better than to draw attention to itself. And yet, beneath that stillness, I could feel a subtle pulse, a faint shiver running through the trees like they were watching me back. A single branch snapped somewhere beyond the perimeter. I froze, heart thudding, imagining someone, or something, moving just out of view. Streetlights above me flickered once, twice, and then settled into an unreliable glow that made the park seem both closer and impossibly distant at the same time. I knew, deep down, that if I stepped closer, I might see something I couldn't unsee. I laughed nervously, muttering under my breath about paranoia. "It's just a park," I said. "Locked parks happen all the time. Probably just renovations, right?" But the rational voice felt small and tired, easily drowned by the whisper of unease curling at the edge of my mind. That's when I noticed the faint indentation near the gateposts. Footprints, I thought at first, but they didn't make sense. Too deep, too deliberate, and only a handful leading straight to the entrance, stopping as if someone, or something, had paused to consider their next move. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. Curiosity is a dangerous thing when the world outside seems to hold secrets you're not meant to uncover. And yet, here I am, writing this, hoping someone will understand what I saw before it decides I've been paying too much attention. I turned back toward the street, pretending the night had nothing to teach me, even though I knew the truth. The park was waiting, and whatever had been inside wasn't done with me. During the day, my neighborhood looks like it was pulled straight out of a brochure. Tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, and houses that all follow the same beige and brown palette, like someone hit copy-paste one too many times. Kids ride bikes along the sidewalks, sprinklers spit arcs of water into the air, and dogs bark at anything that moves faster than a leaf drifting down from a maple. I walk this route every morning to grab coffee, waving at the neighbors who always seem vaguely annoyed to be awake before noon. The park used to be my favorite part of the walk, a small rectangle of green wedged between two streets, with swings that squeaked just enough to announce your presence without making you look ridiculous. During the day, it felt safe. Bright sunlight poured through gaps in the trees, illuminating the faded basketball court lines and the benches that had absorbed decades of neighborhood gossip. I'd sit there sometimes, scrolling through my phone, watching people move around like a slow-motion documentary of suburban life. I should have noticed the little oddities sooner. Maybe you know the feeling. Something just doesn't add up, and yet you ignore it because the world outside your front door is perfectly ordinary. Like the couple who walked their dog at exactly 6:30 every morning, never deviating from the same route, even when it rained. Or the old man on Maple Street who watered his lawn at midnight, always with the same rusty watering can, humming to himself. I never thought much of it. Routine is comforting, right? The park itself carried whispers of its own. Urban legends that never reached the local paper but circulated in hushed tones among kids on skateboards or parents gossiping over fences. Stories of someone, or something, hiding under the swings, of strange lights after dark. I laughed at these tales, of course. Who wouldn't? They're the perfect combination of terrifying and laughable, like bad horror movies that make you cringe and chuckle at the same time. But even the lightest joke carries a seed of truth if you're paying attention. By afternoon, everything feels normal. Birds chirp, a breeze shifts the leaves, and sunlight filters through branches in patterns that look too deliberate to notice consciously. I'd stroll past the park, taking in the familiar sights. A chain-link fence with chipped paint, a fountain that barely worked in summer, the graffiti on the bathroom wall that hadn't been cleaned for years. The park was alive in its own mundane way. It had nothing to hide. At least, that's what I thought. And yet, when night fell, the park became a different place. The streetlights flickered, shadows stretched like they were practicing for something, and the faint sounds of rustling leaves seemed intentional, not random. I began noticing things I hadn't before. The distant glimmer of the padlock through the trees, the way the wind carried sounds oddly, like it was funneling attention toward the park gates. Even the neighbors felt different. I'd see silhouettes moving behind curtains, pausing, as if observing. I'd joke to myself, sure, they're just creepy night owls, but the unease wouldn't leave. I started walking closer, compelled by curiosity and some small, foolish hope that maybe, just maybe, the locked gates were meaningless. That someone had simply decided to renovate or enforce park hours more strictly. But deep down, I knew otherwise. Something had changed. Something had claimed the park at night, and for the first time, I felt the smallest hint of fear creeping into a place that had always felt perfectly ordinary. And that's when I realized the park wasn't just locked. It was waiting. I thought it was just an animal, until I saw it move like nothing I've ever seen before. I had returned to the park that evening, flashlight in hand, trying to convince myself that the locked gates were just a formality. The night air was thick, carrying the faint smell of damp leaves and something else I couldn't identify. Something metallic, almost like the air itself had weight. The streetlights along the sidewalk flickered intermittently, casting long, jittery shadows across the pavement. I paused at the edge of the park, pretending I wasn't holding my breath. At first, I saw nothing. Just the empty swings swaying in the faint breeze, the basketball hoops standing like silent sentinels. But then, a flicker, movement between two trees near the far corner of the playground. I froze. My heart thudded, loud enough that I could hear it in my ears. It's probably a raccoon, I muttered, more to myself than anyone else. Yeah, raccoons are big, right? The figure shifted again, not scuttling like an animal, but gliding, or at least moving without effort. Its limbs, if they could be called that, seemed to bend in impossible ways. I squinted, trying to focus, but the dim glow from the flickering street lamp made it impossible to distinguish features. Only a silhouette, tall, narrow, unnervingly still when it paused, then elongating in ways that made my stomach twist. A rustle of leaves came from behind me. My first instinct was to turn, call someone, anything, but no one was there. Only the faint echo of footsteps that weren't mine. I swallowed hard, pressing my back against the fence, trying to remind myself of all the logical explanations, shadows, imagination, fatigue. I had read stories online, cases like this, where ordinary people saw things that seemed impossible. You know the type, fleeting glimpses, doors opening on their own, shadows with intent. I had laughed at those posts, made jokes in the comments section about overactive imaginations and bad lighting. Now I wondered if they were all warnings in disguise. A whisper carried from somewhere deep inside the park. I couldn't make out words, just syllables, half-formed sentences that seemed meant for me alone. You shouldn't be here. You'll see. The voice was soft, distant, yet unmistakable. I froze again, imagining the shape of the trees twisting, bending slightly as if alive. My curiosity, irrational as it was, pushed me forward. I took a cautious step, then another, tracing the faint glimmer of the figure from a distance. It moved with purpose, and I felt an almost magnetic pull toward it. I reached the swings and stopped, noticing the ground disturbed, not by wind, not by animals, but footprints, shallow and strangely shaped, leading toward the center of the park. I bent down, running my fingers along the indentations. Cold. Not wet, but not dry either. Impossible. I thought about calling Marcus, my go-to for rational explanations, but the thought of putting him on speaker made me hesitate. "You wouldn't believe me," I muttered. Maybe he wouldn't. Maybe no one would. That's the cruel part about these stories. The ones that feel alive. They rely on disbelief to exist. I stepped closer, heart hammering, flashlight trembling. The shadow shifted again, closer this time, but not fully revealing itself. Something about its movement made my instincts scream, "Do not follow." But I couldn't stop. Not now. Not after seeing the footprints. Not after hearing the whispers. I needed to know. And that's when the shape vanished. Just gone. The shadows fell back into normal patterns. The rustling leaves stilled. The streetlights returned to their unremarkable flicker. My hands shook, and I realized I was breathing hard. I glanced around, alone, yet I knew something had been there. Something was waiting, patient and deliberate. I stepped back from the park gates, my curiosity warring with the instinct to flee. But the pull lingered, stronger than any rational thought. Whatever this was, I needed to see it again. And I had a sinking feeling that seeing it wasn't going to be harmless. I couldn't stop thinking about the park. Every time I passed it during the day, the sunlight made it look harmless, even cheerful. Swings creaked, kids laughed, dogs barked. The fence looked like rusted metal, nothing more. But night told a different story. Something was there, waiting, and I was almost too terrified to admit that I wanted to see it again. The next evening, I didn't walk past casually. I lingered at the end of the block, crouched behind a bush that probably didn't provide much cover, but at least gave me the illusion of being invisible. Streetlights flickered intermittently, casting the familiar park in patches of gray and black. I could hear distant traffic, a dog barking far away, but underneath it all was a low, rhythmic rustling, as though the leaves themselves were whispering to each other about my presence. I squinted through the gaps in the fence. A figure appeared, too thin, impossibly tall, but for a moment I convinced myself it was a trick of shadows. Then it moved. Not the stumbling motion of an animal or the purposeful stride of a person, something else. Flowing, deliberate, yet it didn't seem to occupy the space it should. One moment, it was beside the basketball court. The next, it seemed to shift closer to the gate without crossing any ground I could see. "Okay," I muttered, crouching lower. Maybe I did see something. Maybe I didn't. Probably just trees. My voice sounded hollow even to me. The rationalizations were weak. I leaned closer, pressing my face against the chain links. The air smelled faintly metallic, like blood or rust, sharp and immediate. Something had brushed the fence posts. I could see faint streaks, smudges that weren't dirt, not exactly, but neither were they paint. I reached toward them, my fingers trembling. Cold, smooth, not the texture of anything natural. A rustle behind me made me jump. "Hello," I whispered, half expecting someone to answer. Of course, no one did. Just the night. Just the park. Just something watching. I circled to the side, trying to get a better angle without stepping too close. Each step made my heart hammer. Each shadow seemed heavier, waiting for me to notice it. Then I heard it, a soft, deliberate tapping, not on the ground, but from the trees themselves, like knuckles rapping against bark in a rhythm I couldn't match. I stopped, my ears straining. There it was again. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, calling me, or warning me. I wasn't sure which. I took a deep breath and called out, though my voice shook. "Who's there?" I don't want trouble. The rustling paused, like it was listening. Then it started again, faster, more insistent. I wanted to run, but something held me. Curiosity? Obligation? A stupid desire to see it fully? I couldn't tell anymore. I moved along the fence, eyes darting from the faint movements inside to the shadows around me. A bench shifted slightly, though no wind blew. A swing swayed, though I hadn't noticed anyone near it. My flashlight beam caught what looked like footprints pressed into the dirt beyond the gate. Deep, heavy, not human, and arranged in patterns that made no sense. Circles, half-moons, lines that bent impossibly. I whispered into my phone, typing messages to Marcus I couldn't bring myself to send. You won't believe this. I shouldn't be here. Something's wrong. It was wrong. All of it. The air, the silence, the shadows. Even the familiar layout of the park seemed alien under the night sky. And then I noticed a new detail, something that chilled me so deeply I almost collapsed in place. The padlock. It wasn't just locked. It had scratches along the edges, small and precise, like someone, or something, had been testing it, tracing it, practicing how to open it without leaving evidence. And beneath the lock, faint streaks marred the metal, like fingerprints. Not human fingerprints. Too long, too thin, too deliberate. I stumbled backward, heart racing. I wanted to leave. I knew I should leave, but the pull was still there. Something about the way the footprints curved and led toward the far end of the park made me feel like I could trace the path if I just got closer. A whisper rose again, faint at first, curling around the fence and into my ears. Closer, closer, you'll see. I jumped at the sound. My own words whispered back at me, twisted, stretched. I pressed my hands over my ears, shaking my head, laughing nervously. It's nothing, I muttered. Just nerves. Just my imagination. Classic horror movie paranoia. Yet I knew it wasn't imagination. The air felt thicker now, oppressive, like something had decided I had lingered too long and was watching me directly. And the footprints, the impossible patterns, were still there, etched into the dirt beyond the fence, waiting for me to follow them. I stepped closer to the gate, gripping the chain links. My fingers brushed the cold metal. Another whisper. Do you want to see? I swallowed hard. Yes, I wanted to see. I shouldn't have. But my feet were already moving, tracing the dirt, feeling the prints, following the impossible path that led deeper into the park. Shadows bent as I walked. Leaves shifted. The whispers rose and fell like a tide. I couldn't tell if the noise was behind me or ahead or inside my own head. Every step made the ordinary park feel smaller, as though the night itself was folding around me. My pulse thundered. My flashlight trembled. The familiar swings, the old basketball hoop, the cracked benches, they all seemed wrong now, alive in some subtle, deliberate way. I kept glancing around, certain I wasn't alone, but certain too that if I ran, I'd miss the truth I was chasing. And then it clicked. The park wasn't just locked. Not for safety, not for renovation. Something had taken it. Something I was only beginning to understand. Something patient. Something deliberate. I hesitated at the edge of the central clearing. The footprints stopped here. The whispers faded, just for a moment. I could feel it. Waiting. Watching. And I realized with a sinking certainty. If I truly wanted to know what the park held, I would have to go all the way in. There was no turning back. Sleep stopped being restful the night after I followed the footprints. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Not just the patterns in the dirt, but the way the shadows moved, folding unnaturally, stretching just beyond the limits of perception. I tried to shrug it off, telling myself it was nothing more than exhaustion. The mind playing tricks on someone who had stared too long at flickering streetlights and rusted gates. But the fear wasn't fleeting, It had rooted itself, growing like an uninvited tenant. I started keeping my blinds closed during the day, even though nothing happened under the sun. Something about the ordinary brightness seemed off now, almost aggressive in its honesty. I'd catch myself staring at my window, imagining the silhouettes of things crouched just outside, moving silently, testing the glass. The rational part of me laughed. "You're insane," I'd mutter to myself. But the whisper of doubt, soft, deliberate, insistent, never went away. By the third night, I couldn't sleep at all. I paced my apartment, counting the minutes until street lights flickered into life, until the familiar route past the park would be bathed in that unreliable glow. I checked my phone obsessively for messages from Marcus, half expecting him to have sent some warning, some rational explanation for what I had seen. Of course, he hadn't, and I knew better than to reach out. He would just tell me I was imagining it. But maybe that was the point. Maybe only the truly observant could notice the truth, and the truth was dangerous. Hallucinations started creeping in, subtle at first. A shadow stretching across my living room, pausing in ways it shouldn't. The faint sound of footsteps outside my door when I knew I was alone. I tried to joke about it, whispering into my phone. Probably just raccoons, or ghosts with a sense of humor. But the joke felt hollow. Nothing was funny anymore. I scoured forums late at night, searching for anything that resembled what I'd seen. People described parks that moved, shadows that waited, shapes that weren't entirely there. The comments were a mixture of mockery and warnings. Some posts vanished after hours, replaced with edits that said, "Stop looking. You don't want to know." I found myself nodding, even smiling grimly. Someone else got it. Someone else had been close. Paranoia became routine. I started checking the locks on my apartment obsessively, even though nothing had tried to enter. I recorded my room overnight on my phone to catch any movement I couldn't see with my eyes. Every sound, creaking floorboards, the wind rattling a window, the hum of the refrigerator, felt intentional. Waiting. Communicating. At work, I caught myself zoning out, staring at shadows in the corners of rooms, imagining figures moving just beyond the fluorescent lights. My coworkers noticed. "You okay?" one asked, and I waved them off with a grin that didn't reach my eyes. "Just tired," I said. Cynical humor had become my armor, but it didn't hold back the dread clawing in my chest. I began obsessively retracing my steps from the night I first saw the park. Each detail mattered. The faint metallic scent of the air, the way the leaves rustled when I wasn't moving, the pattern of footprints frozen in my mind. I could practically see the shape shifting in the shadows, testing the limits of its own presence. I wondered if it was learning from me, waiting for me to falter, to leave an opening it could occupy. And I realized I couldn't avoid it. The park had drawn a line, invisible but unmistakable. Every night that I lingered in bed, letting my thoughts drift away, I felt the pull. It wasn't just curiosity anymore, it was necessity. I needed to know what had taken residence there, what the whispers meant, what the footprints wanted. By the fifth night, I was resolved. Sleep-deprived, jittery, borderline hallucinating, I understood one thing clearly. I couldn't outrun this. I couldn't ignore it. If I wanted to reclaim my own sense of reality, I had to confront the park, step inside, trace the footprints, face whatever had been waiting in the shadows. I stared at the window one last time before heading out, the city quiet, streetlights flickering, and the park looming ahead like a dark promise. I shivered, half from the cold and half from anticipation. I knew danger waited. I knew I was close to something I shouldn't fully understand. But I couldn't stop now, because whatever was in the park, whatever had marked it as forbidden, had already marked me. And I was too curious, too obsessed, too alive, or too foolish to walk away. I shouldn't have stepped inside, but I had to know what was waiting for me. The padlock yielded easily under my trembling fingers, rusted and scorched as though it had been tested countless times before I arrived. Beyond the gate, the park stretched into darkness that felt alive. Streetlights didn't reach here, their glow ending abruptly at the edges, leaving the playground, the basketball courts, and the walking paths swathed in shadow. The air was thick, carrying that metallic scent again, sharper now, like iron mixed with ozone, almost suffocating. Each step into the park felt deliberate, as if the ground itself were aware I had trespassed. The footprints I had memorized days ago seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light, guiding me deeper. They were larger than human, elongated and uneven, curling at the edges like they were unwilling to remain simple impressions. I followed them instinctively, trying to keep my flashlight steady, though the beam flickered and threatened to die, as though even the electronics were wary of what lay ahead. I passed the swings first. One shifted slightly as I approached, creaking in a sound that didn't match the rhythm of the wind. I froze, convinced someone, or something, was watching. And then I heard it, a faint tapping, deliberate, like knuckles rapping against bark, soft and measured, echoing around the clearing. I told myself it was my imagination. I told myself I was being paranoid. But I knew better. I rounded the corner near the basketball court, and the whispers began. Low at first, almost drowned by the rustle of leaves, then rising in pitch and intensity, layering over themselves in a cadence that sounded like syllables but defied language. I stopped, trying to catch a single word. There was none, only the impression of communication, a message carried directly to the mind rather than the ears. A shape emerged from the darkness. At first, it was just a shadow, impossibly tall and narrow, stretching toward me in angles that my eyes could not process. Then I saw the limbs, or the appendages, or whatever they were, bend in ways no human joint could allow. The ground beneath it didn't shift. It seemed to hover, leaning into space as if gravity were irrelevant. My pulse pounded. "Who are you?" I whispered, voice cracking. My words felt meaningless in the cold night. It tilted toward me, impossibly slow, and the whispers grew louder, closer, yet still not tied to any origin I could locate. I stumbled back, realizing my flashlight wasn't just flickering. It was reacting, quivering like a living thing. The shadows around the edges of the park thickened, coiling like smoke, yet solid enough to suggest form. I had the uncanny sensation that the park itself had shifted, that the familiar layout was a lie, and that I had wandered into a space with rules I didn't understand. Footprints appeared where there had been none. My own steps left marks now, smudged, indistinct, as though the ground refused to remember that I was real. I tried to make sense of it, to ground myself. But the longer I stood there, the more I felt the boundaries of the park dissolve. The benches warped subtly when I blinked. The swings moved in impossible arcs. I understood then. This was not a park anymore. Not in the way I had known it. A sudden motion caught my eye. Something, or someone, moved across the field of darkness in a way that made me gasp. Not walking, not running, not even floating, but bending space itself, folding shadows, stepping into existence where none should be. My stomach churned. I realized, with a clarity that chilled me, that the park wasn't locked to keep people out. It was locked because it couldn't hold itself together when the uninitiated entered. Because the night inside it was alive, deliberate, and patient. I wanted to flee, but my curiosity rooted me in place. The whispers seemed to converge, pressing into my mind. I felt a pulse, a rhythm that was both external and internal, matching the beat of my heart, yet impossibly slower, deliberate, ancient. The shape drew closer, and I noticed details that shouldn't have existed. Its form flickered, revealing glimpses of faces, hundreds of tiny, impossible faces pressed into its surface, eyes that seemed aware, mouths that opened and closed without sound. I stumbled back, tripping over a path stone that wasn't there a moment ago. My flashlight fell, clattering across the dirt. The beam landed on the footprints again. They had multiplied, leading directly to the center of the park, forming a pattern that made no geometric sense but radiated intent. I realized with horror, the footprints weren't just marks. They were invitations, instructions, warnings. And I had followed them all the way. The thing paused, almost contemplative, observing me. And then it spoke, or at least, I understood the message. Not words, not sound, but a direct impression of thought. You stepped into what you shouldn't. You are now part of the pattern. I screamed, a sound swallowed by the night. The shadows writhed, reaching, curling, pulling. I ran blindly, back the way I came. But the park refused to be linear. Paths twisted. Familiar landmarks shifted. The gate I had entered through seemed miles away now, as though the park had elongated itself to trap me in its depths. In desperation, I slammed my hands against the fence, shouting for it to stop, shouting for it to leave me alone. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the shadows recoiled. The whispers faded, leaving a profound silence. I found myself outside the park gates, heart hammering, drenched in sweat, trembling uncontrollably. The padlock gleamed innocuously in the dim streetlight, and everything inside appeared ordinary again. The swings swayed gently in the night breeze. The asphalt paths lay flat and unthreatening. I didn't know what had happened or how I had survived the encounter, but I understood one immutable truth. The park had a will of its own. It claimed the night, the darkness, the empty spaces. It marked its boundaries carefully, waiting for those who strayed too close. I turned toward home, every nerve taut, and glanced back once. For a moment, I thought I saw movement, a shadow folding into itself, observing, patient. Then the streetlight flickered and stabilized. Nothing remained but the quiet, suburban calm I had always taken for granted. I knew that I had crossed a threshold, seen what was forbidden, and survived. But I also knew that some part of the park had followed me out, lingering in memory, in awareness, in the rhythm of my pulse. And I could feel, deep down, that the curiosity that had led me there was not yet satisfied. Whatever waits in the park at night is patient. It does not hurry. It does not forget. And now, it knows I have seen. I finally understand, though I'm not sure I want to. The park isn't cursed in the way stories make it sound, and it isn't haunted by some malevolent spirit looking for victims. At least, not in the way you think. The truth is more insidious, more deliberate, and somehow more terrifying. The footprints, the whispers, the impossible shapes, they weren't random. They were markers, guides, warnings left by something ancient, something that exists between perception and reality. The park at night isn't just locked to keep people out. It's locked to contain something that feeds on the thin veil between what's ordinary and what's not. That thing, or presence, shapes the space it occupies, folds it, bends it, and stretches it, creating illusions to test your curiosity, your perception, your sanity. The locked gates aren't barriers, they're invitations. And I had accepted one. When I stepped inside, I wasn't just trespassing on property. I was trespassing on rules that predated the park itself. Rules written not in stone or paper, but in perception, patience, and the delicate balance of attention. Every rustle of leaves, every elongated shadow, every whispering syllable was a probe, a measure of how far I'd go, how much I would see. And I went far, too far. I keep replaying the details in my mind. The way the shadows stretched unnaturally, the way the figures seemed to exist in multiple places at once, the fleeting glimpses of faces pressed into darkness. Was it supernatural? Perhaps. Was it psychological? Almost certainly. But the lines don't matter. The fear, the obsession, the relentless pull, that's real. And I'm marked by it. In the days since, life has resumed its normal rhythm, or as close to normal as it can. The park looks ordinary in the daylight. Children play, couples stroll, dogs chase balls. I walk past it now without looking. The swing chains clink in the wind as though nothing ever happened. Yet I feel the pull even now, faint but persistent, a reminder that the park has memory. It watches. It waits. I've tried to convince myself it was all in my head. I post online, leave vague comments on forums, see if anyone else has noticed oddities, but mostly I'm careful. There are rules here, even now. Some things aren't meant to be discussed openly. I hint, I joke darkly, I test curiosity in others, but I don't lead anyone there. Some knowledge is dangerous, and some curiosity fatal. The fear has dulled, but not disappeared. Shadows linger in peripheral vision. Footsteps echo when no one is there. I wake in the middle of the night, certain I hear whispers brushing the edges of my consciousness. The difference now is I recognize them. I acknowledge them, and I move past them without stepping fully into the space they claim. I survived, but part of me will always belong to that night, to the park, to the impossible rules I briefly glimpsed. I needed to know, and now I do. The truth is less dramatic than some horror stories, but somehow worse. There isn't a monster under the swings or a malevolent spirit in the trees. There's something older, something patient, something that exists in the interstices of attention and disbelief. It tests those who linger, measures those who dare, and folds reality around them. I was measured, I was tested, and I survived. But surviving doesn't erase what you've seen. The park taught me that. Knowledge comes at a price, and the curiosity that drives you to look deeper can leave marks you don't see until later. My mind replays the night endlessly, shifting and warping like the park itself. I have dreams where the boundaries bend, where whispers crawl through the air around me, drawing shapes I can almost comprehend but never fully grasp. And now I can finally speak it aloud, because someone has to know. It's over for me, at least in the sense that I can leave the park alone and walk past it without stepping inside. I can't unsee what I saw, and I can't undo what I learned. But telling you, sharing the story, even partially, is a release, a warning, a record. So here it is. The park is locked for a reason, not because of vandals or neighborhood bylaws, not because of petty rules or fear of crime. It is locked because what exists there cannot be contained in ordinary perception, yet cannot be left entirely free. It is patient, it is deliberate, and it is always waiting for someone like me, or someone like you, to notice it. It's over now. I just needed someone to know. I needed someone to understand that the ordinary can bend, that curiosity can have consequences, and that even a small, quiet park in the middle of a suburban neighborhood can hide something you will never forget. And yes, if you ever see it, if you ever notice footprints, shadows, whispers, you will understand exactly what I mean. But don't go any further. Some doors aren't meant to be opened. Some paths aren't meant to be followed. Some knowledge you don't survive without paying. I survived, but I carry it with me. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Days have passed since that night, though it feels longer. The park is still locked, and life outside its boundaries seems ordinary again. Children laugh, dogs bark, joggers pace their familiar loops. Sunlight touches the swings and benches, and the shadows retreat into normalcy. And yet, I know it's all an illusion. The memory of that night doesn't fade. It lingers, a faint pulse beneath the calm, reminding me that the ordinary can hide the unimaginable. I catch myself glancing at the park from my window, expecting movement that isn't there. I hear whispers and the rustling of leaves, subtle at first, growing when I pause too long. I tell myself it's paranoia, insomnia, imagination, but part of me knows the truth. Curiosity has a price, and I've paid it. I've seen what waits in the spaces most people never notice, the moments they overlook, the places they dismiss. I share this story not to frighten, though you should be wary, but to warn. Some doors are locked for a reason. Some paths lead to places that do not bend to ordinary rules. If you notice something strange, don't follow it out of curiosity. Don't be tempted by whispers or footprints that seem to invite you in. Some truths exist to be glimpsed, not explored. Even now, I feel the pull when I walk past the gate. A subtle tug, almost imperceptible, in my chest and in the rhythm of my steps. I ignore it, but I know it hasn't forgotten me. The park remembers. It waits. It waits for those who think they're safe, who think that seeing it from afar is enough. And so, this is where the story ends. The park remains behind its gates, patient, deliberate, as it always has been. I survived, yes, but survival doesn't mean freedom. It means understanding boundaries, respecting what lurks beyond them, and carrying the memory of what exists in shadows that others cannot see. So if you ever notice a gate locked, a shadow moving where it shouldn't, a whisper you can't explain, step back. Walk away. Don't follow. Because some places aren't meant to be entered. And some nights shouldn't be remembered.